Your boss didn't wake up one morning and decide to make your life miserable. They were trained to do it by someone who was trained before them. And the organization you both work for has been watching the whole time, doing absolutely nothing. Because your boss hits the quarterly numbers, and nobody above them is measuring what it costs to get there. Look, this won't tell you to set boundaries and communicate openly like your boss is a reasonable person who just needs a nudge. I respect your intelligence more than that. What follows is the actual psychology, the machinery behind why your manager does the things they do, where it comes from, and why the company keeps letting it happen. 13 mechanisms, 20 minutes. By the end, you'll understand your workplace better than your boss does. Honestly, that's a low bar, but we'll start there anyway. So let's start where it starts. You're at your desk, replaying a conversation from this morning. You've got work open, but you're not doing it. You're replaying a conversation from this morning where your boss said something that made your stomach drop, and you can't even figure out why. The comment wasn't overtly cruel. Nobody would call it a fireable offense. It was just this specific tone, this particular way of making you feel like you'd done something wrong without ever telling you what it was. And now you're spending the afternoon analyzing it instead of doing your actual job. That one landed, right? Good. That means this is for you. Most people get toxic bosses wrong, though. We treat them like villains, like they woke up, looked in the mirror, and chose to be terrible. That's satisfying. Also, mostly wrong. The more accurate version, and honestly the more unsettling one, is this. Your boss didn't invent any of this. They inherited it. They were shaped by the same kind of environment they're now creating. That word product matters. Somewhere along the way, they had a manager who operated on fear, who withheld information, who confused control with leadership. They survived that person. They adapted, got promoted inside that system, and now they're running the same playbook because it's the only version of management they've ever seen get rewarded. The unsettling part is that their boss probably had a boss exactly like them, and nobody stopped the cycle. Nobody comes through that and thinks, I should do this differently. They come through it thinking, I guess that's how it works. And the people who survive it don't come out thinking I should turn the heat down. They come out thinking, I guess this is what heat is. None of this excuses anything. Understanding the origin doesn't make the behavior acceptable, but it does shift the frame from I'm being targeted by a bad person to I'm caught in a system that keeps producing the same kind of manager. That second frame is both more accurate and eventually more useful. The cycle explains how they got here. What it doesn't explain are the specific behaviors. The hovering, the credit stealing, the mood swings that make Monday morning feel like a coin flip. And the first one worth examining is the one everyone recognizes, but almost nobody understands. Micromanagement. Everyone calls it that, everyone hates it, and almost nobody understands what it actually is. Diligence looks different. High standards look different. Your boss caring so much about the work that they just have to be involved in every detail? That's the story micromanagers tell themselves. It's a comfortable story. It also falls apart the second you look at it. Micromanagement most of the time is just anxiety. That's it. They're scared and they're hovering because of it. It just doesn't look like anxiety because it's wearing a lanyard and asking for a status update. It's the behavioral output of a person who is terrified, on some level they may not even be conscious of, that they're going to be exposed, that someone will find out they don't actually know what they're doing, that the competence they project in meetings doesn't match what they feel at 2 a.m. when they can't sleep. Here's how it works. Not all of them, but a surprising number of toxic bosses got the job because they were great at the job before it. The one that had nothing to do with managing people. You can be an exceptional engineer, an exceptional salesperson, and be an absolutely terrible manager. Those things coexist all the time. Organizations promote based on individual performance because individual performance is easy to measure. Leadership ability isn't, so it gets ignored. You end up with managers who got the title without getting the tools, and a person in a role they're not equipped for controls what they can. They check your work obsessively, ask for updates on the update. They CC the entire team on a reply that needed to go to one person. They schedule a meeting to discuss the meeting. Feedback makes them defensive because every piece of feedback feels like evidence that they've been found out. I watched this happen in real time with someone I used to work with. The look on their face was pure panic wearing a professional smile, and the credit stealing operates on the same fuel. A boss who feels secure in their position doesn't need to absorb your ideas. A boss who's terrified they'll be replaced does, because they need every piece they can get to justify their existence. So Insecurity explains the hovering, the credit stealing, the defensiveness. It does. But the chaos? The way everything keeps shifting? I had to think about that one separately. The way the rules seem to change, the way a decision made on Thursday is somehow different by Monday. That requires a different mechanism. That feeling when you walk into work on Monday and you can't tell which version of your boss you're going to get. Everyone with a toxic boss knows it in their body before they know it in their head. Friday, they were fine, almost friendly. They said good morning, approved your proposal, and you went home thinking maybe things are turning around. Then, Monday happens. Different person entirely. Short with you, critical about things they approved 3 days ago. That same proposal now has concerns. No explanation for what changed, no acknowledgement that anything shifted at all. And you spend the rest of the day adjusting, recalibrating, trying to figure out what you did, what changed, what you missed. Your actual work sits untouched while you manage your boss's mood. That's where your Tuesday goes. The inconsistency has a function, though. Your boss probably didn't sit down and design a strategy of unpredictability. The effect is the same whether it's conscious or not. A team that can't predict their manager's reactions stays focused on one thing above all others: managing the manager. Reading the room, testing the temperature, figuring out if today is safe to bring up the issue. Waiting, a team spending its cognitive energy on that isn't doing something far more dangerous, like asking hard questions, pushing back on bad decisions, or pointing out that the strategy doesn't make sense. Inconsistency functions as a management strategy, a terrible one, but a strategy. Your boss loved the idea on Friday, has concerns about it Monday, and will have no memory of either position by Wednesday. You know the pattern. Your team has learned, quietly, without ever discussing it, to wait 72 hours before acting on anything because it might all change. It usually does. The unpredictability is exhausting, and I was going to move on to something else, but actually, no. I want to stay here for a second. Because what comes next is worse, and it's connected. Then your idea shows up in a meeting, presented by someone else, to mild applause. And suddenly it's very personal. The meeting. You know this meeting. You're in the meeting. You've got your laptop open like you're taking notes, but really you're just watching. About 4 minutes in, you hear it. Your idea, the one you brought up 2 weeks ago, the one you put in an email with a subject line and a timestamp. Except now it has slightly different language and a new slide, and your boss is describing it with the confidence of someone who genuinely believes they thought of it. You sit there, holding your coffee, doing the math on whether saying something would help or make it worse. Credit stealing in toxic managers rarely looks like deliberate theft. In their experience, it doesn't feel like robbery. It feels like memory. They were in the room when the idea was discussed. It entered their thinking, mixed with other things, and somewhere in that process, the line between I heard this and I thought of this got blurred. Blurred in a way that conveniently always goes in their direction, every single time. Most cases, this is a very convenient memory operating inside a power structure that never requires them to correct it. Nobody asks, and they never volunteer. Then there's the louder version. The joke at your expense in a team meeting. The correction delivered publicly when it could have been a private conversation. The subtle undermining disguised as humor, followed by just kidding. Just kidding is doing extraordinary work in that sentence. Credit absorption pulls your contributions toward the boss, while public humiliation pushes you down in the visible hierarchy. Both serve the same function. Your contributions disappear and your mistakes get amplified. And what makes this especially hard to navigate is that half the time you can't point to what went wrong, because the expectations were never clear enough to argue with. Which brings us to the feedback problem. The performance review. You walked in having genuinely tried to improve. Want to level up your people skills? Join our community on YouTube or on my Patreon for exclusive scripts, early access, and connection with people who get the social struggle. Links below. Let's master human interaction together. You took notes on the last review, you made adjustments, you asked for feedback along the way and got vague reassurances. Then you sat down and your boss read you a sentence that technically contained words but communicated nothing. Lacks strategic thinking. 3 words, written in an official document. No definition of what strategic thinking means in this context, no example of when you lacked it, no direction on what demonstrating it would look like. 3 words and a checkbox, same note next year. Vague expectations and ambiguous feedback function as a power tool, whether the person using them realizes it or not. If the target is unclear, it can be moved. And if it can be moved, your boss can always tell you that you missed. Clarity would require commitment. It would require your boss to say specifically, success looks like this, measured by these metrics on this timeline. That would make them accountable too, because clarity creates mutual accountability. Vagueness eliminates it. So the expectations stay fuzzy, the goals stay ambiguous, the feedback stays just specific enough to feel like feedback, but too vague to act on. You stay in a state of permanent uncertainty, working hard, trying to improve, genuinely investing effort, with no way of knowing whether you're getting closer or further away. The person who could tell you has decided that clarity isn't in their interest. Unclear expectations set the trap. And you already know where this goes, right? Something goes wrong. Something always goes wrong. You're in a meeting, something went wrong with a project, a missed deadline, a client complaint, a deliverable that didn't land, standard stuff. And you're watching, in real time, as the history of that project gets rewritten by someone sitting 2 feet away from you, with a straight face. The decision that was made collectively is now described as your recommendation. The risk the team flagged is now a risk that should have been escalated sooner. The timeline that was set by your boss is now a timeline that the team committed to. The pronouns shift from we to you so smoothly that if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. You are paying attention because this is your career being narrated by someone else. Toxic bosses are the fastest people in any room when it comes to escaping accountability. When things go right, they're right there. When things go wrong, somehow they were never in the room. When things go well, the boss was the leader who guided the team. When things go badly, the boss was the leader who trusted the team, perhaps too much. I'm not entirely sure why this framing works as well as it does on senior leadership, but it does, almost every time. A lot of toxic bosses do this without full awareness. They've genuinely reconstructed the events to center their own non-culpability. Memory is flexible, and power makes it more so. The version where it wasn't their fault is a story they've already told themselves before they ever told it to you. Arguing about what actually happened is almost always a losing strategy. You're challenging their reality, and they've had more practice defending it. This is where documentation stops being paranoia and starts being self-preservation. The email that says, just to confirm, here's what we agreed to. The meeting notes sent within the hour. The paper trail that exists because you've learned that memory in this office is not equally shared. The blame lands on someone, and there's a pattern to who gets protected and who gets exposed. That pattern has everything to do with loyalty. Team meeting. You've done the research. You've put together a solid recommendation backed by data, aligned with the team's goals. You present it clearly. Your boss nods, says let's circle back on that, and moves on. 2 minutes later, the favorite, and you know who the favorite is, everyone does, it's the one thing the entire team agrees on. The favorite says something half-formed, and your boss lights up. Great point. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. You drink your coffee. You've done this math before. Favoritism in these places, at least the version I keep seeing, comes down to safety. The favorite is the person who stopped challenging the boss somewhere around month 3 and never started again. They found the right register of deference, just compliant enough to never trigger the boss's threat detection, and they stayed there. Both parties would deny the transaction, but the transaction is real. The favorite gets protection, gets their ideas heard, gets the benefit of the doubt. In exchange, the boss gets a reliable ally, someone who won't push back in meetings, won't question decisions publicly, won't create friction. The favorite passed a loyalty test by being safe. The rest of the team sees this clearly, and that's what makes it corrosive. Favoritism rewrites the entire team's understanding of how success works in this environment. People stop trying to do good work and start trying to not get noticed. Once a team internalizes that lesson, the best people start leaving, and the compliant people start getting promoted. Cycle continues. The let's circle back never circles back, and the idea that gets ignored in November gets credited to someone else in January. The favorite isn't winning either. They're trading their autonomy for proximity to power, one meeting at a time. Favoritism is the carrot, and toxic bosses also have a stick. The stick is quieter than you'd expect. You sent an email. Nothing special, just a status update and a question, short. And that was a day and a half ago. They've been active on Slack, replied to someone else's message in the group channel. They were in a meeting you weren't invited to. And now you're reading your own email for the 14th time, trying to find the sentence that was wrong, the tone that was off, the question that overstepped. The email is fine. Somewhere underneath the anxiety, you know that. The silence has already done its work. That's the whole tool. Fear-based leadership is efficient in the short term and unstable over time. The specific version I want to talk about isn't yelling, isn't threats, isn't the dramatic confrontation in a conference room. Those exist, But they're the amateur version. The professional version is silence. Silence, used correctly, is the most efficient punishment available to a manager. No paperwork, no HR conversation, no documentation. Just stop acknowledging that someone exists and let them spend the next 3 days figuring out what they did. And if you tried to explain it to someone outside the situation, you'd sound paranoid. That's what makes it work. A team that's slightly afraid pays very close attention. But the attention paid to managing fear is attention stolen from creative thinking, problem solving, collaboration. It just crowds out everything else. The short-term compliance gains, people working late, people meeting impossible deadlines through sheer anxiety, those gains are real. They're dramatically outweighed by the long-term costs. Turnover, disengagement, the slow departure of everyone talented enough to have options. Fear keeps you in your lane, and staying in your lane has another effect, one that's less dramatic but just as damaging. It stops you from growing. The training budget exists. It's on a slide somewhere from last year's All Hands. Referenced in the employee handbook, technically real, in the way that a lot of corporate promises are real, on paper. You've asked about it twice. First time your boss said it wasn't a great quarter for discretionary spending. Second time they said, let's revisit after the reorg. There's always a reason, and the reasons are always reasonable. 3 years later, the training budget remains untouched. The promotion conversation has been tabled 4 times. The stretch project went to someone with less experience but better proximity to the boss. The conference that would have put you in front of people in other departments got flagged as not a priority right now. Your development plan is technically a document. It lives in a folder that no one has opened since Q3 of last year. This one's harder to prove, but I believe your boss is blocking your development because somewhere in there they can tell you don't actually need them. And that scares them. I know that sounds backwards, so let me explain. A version of you that's more capable, more connected, more confident, needs them less. A version of you that needs them less might leave, might get promoted past them, might ask questions they can't answer, might make their own limitations visible just by comparison. Keeping the team dependent is a survival strategy for them. Knowledge hoarding, being the only person who understands a key process, who has the relationship with the client, who knows the history, that's territory protection. Refusing to delegate meaningful work keeps the idea alive that the boss is essential, that without them, nothing works. Your boss needs you to need them, and every opportunity they block is an opportunity that might have changed that equation. And all of this accumulates. The Sunday dread. You know what I mean. If you felt your chest tighten just reading those 2 words, that tells you something. It starts somewhere around 4 p.m. on Sunday and doesn't fully leave until you've survived Monday morning. A specific low-grade nausea that has its own schedule. You've noticed it starting earlier recently. Last month it was Sunday evening, now it's Sunday afternoon. Last week you felt it on Saturday night, and that scared you, and then you told yourself you were being dramatic. You're not being dramatic. Toxic leadership systematically wears down the psychological resources people need to function. That sentence sounds clinical, but the experience is anything but. The always-on availability expectation, the emails at 10 p.m. that aren't emergencies but create the impression that emergencies could come at any time, the impossible deadlines that exist, because urgency is the only management mode your boss knows. This is how it builds. First, one late night. You stay because there's a genuine deadline, fine. Then it happens again, and this time the deadline was artificial, but you didn't know that. Then it becomes an expectation, understood but never stated. Then it becomes your identity. Then you're in a job interview 3 years later, describing yourself as someone who really goes the extra mile and you don't even hear it. You've internalized someone else's exploitation as your own personality trait. The health costs are real and documented. Chronic workplace stress doesn't stay at work. It follows you into your sleep, your relationships, your body. The anxiety that starts as a response to an unpredictable boss becomes a baseline state that doesn't turn off when you leave the building. The exhaustion that starts as physical becomes something deeper. The kind that a weekend can't fix, that a vacation only temporarily masks. The damage doesn't appear on the company's balance sheet. It appears in yours. All of this, the fear, the chaos, the blocked growth, the burnout, raises an obvious question. Does your boss know? Do they have any idea what they're creating? The 360-degree feedback process. The company rolled it out with genuine enthusiasm. Everyone filled it out, some people were honest, results were compiled, patterns identified, themes summarized, a report generated. Your boss read it, or at least skimmed it. Nothing changed. The next year, same process, same results, same nothing. That was 2 years ago. The problem isn't always delusion, though some bosses are genuinely deluded. The deeper issue is that they're receiving feedback from a system that keeps confirming the wrong things. Their own boss thinks they're effective because the numbers look fine from 2 levels up and nobody's filing formal complaints. That gap can last for years in leadership, entire careers sometimes, because the feedback loops are long, the consequences are diffuse, and the people most affected are the least empowered to speak honestly. The system that fails to give them honest feedback is the same system actively protecting them. Everything I've described so far, the insecurity, the unpredictability, the credit theft, the fear, the burnout, you probably walked into this thinking, those were your boss's character flaws, their failures as a human being. They're also symptoms of an organizational system that created this person, promoted this person, and continues to protect this person. Your boss exists inside a company that made a series of choices. It chose to promote based on individual performance rather than leadership ability. It chose to skip management training or invest in the kind that's a 2-day workshop followed by nothing. Why does the company let it keep happening? Because when they look at the numbers say it's working. A toxic boss who delivers short-term results has a visible, quantifiable value. It's the kind of damage that doesn't show up until everyone worth keeping has already left. Organizations weigh what they can see, and what they can see is this quarter's numbers. The brilliant jerk gets protected because the short-term math works, and the price gets paid by the people on the team. So what do you actually do with all of this? Because understanding the system is genuinely useful, but you still have to go to work on Monday. Monday is coming, and you need a plan. Let me be honest about what comes next. I can't tell you how to fix your toxic boss. You're not going to fix this person. I know you've tried. Being more professional, more patient, more accommodating, it doesn't work. You can't coach someone who doesn't know they need coaching. I also won't tell you how to thrive in a toxic environment, because thriving is the wrong word for successfully adapting to a system that's damaging you. What I can offer is a clear-eyed inventory of your actual options, sorted by how much power you actually have. Honest starting point. Option 1, change your relationship to the situation. Strategic adjustment. Document everything because you've correctly identified that memory in your workplace is unreliable and power-dependent. Your boss is one person in a larger structure. They are not the entire organization. Option 2, change the situation from within. Escalate, but strategically, with clear eyes about what formal channels can and can't do. Know which situation you're in before you walk through that door. And then there's the third option, which is just leave. Walk away. A rational decision made by someone who has correctly assessed a situation and determined that the costs of staying exceed the costs of going. Sometimes the rational move is to walk away from a situation where the structure is working against you. I won't tell you which option is right. That depends on your financial situation, your industry, your options, your tolerance, your life. What I can tell you is this: you now understand what's happening, why it's happening, and who benefits from it continuing. That understanding doesn't fix the situation, but it shifts your position inside it. You're not sitting there wondering what you did wrong anymore. And no, it's not you. It was never you. 20 minutes ago, you clicked on this video because something at work felt wrong and you couldn't quite name it. Now you can name it. What you do with that, the naming, the understanding, the framework, that's yours. And for the first time in a while, that might actually feel like enough. Learned something new? Hit that like button, share it with others, tap subscribe, and stick around for more. Got thoughts? I'd love to hear them in the comments.